Hello, this is John Hesse, and Merry Christmas. Christmas will be coming up soon. We're reading from Of Moose and Men by Tori Martin and Doug Peterson, reading a chapter entitled Christmas with Grandma. Before I leave the subject of Christmas, because he was speaking about Christmas in the previous chapter, I have to tell you about my family's tree decorating tradition back in Washington State. A story that goes a long way toward explaining why Christmas is such a special time for me. It might also explain some of my eccentric ways. Every Christmas, my parents made a point of inviting to our house guys from church who had served in the military but couldn't make it home for the holidays. My mother would tell them all about the heirloom ornaments that filled our huge Christmas tree. Some of the ornaments were handmade, some of them quite expensive. Others were just tree fillers. But there was one ornament far more important than all the others. This ornament was my grandma Burmeister. I don't mean the ornament used to belong to my grandma Burmeister. I mean the ornament was indeed my grandma. My grandma was kind of odd. Any surprise there? And she said that when she passed away, she wanted her body cremated and her ashes blown into 4 glass Christmas ornaments. That way she could be given to each of her 4 children and hang around on their trees and celebrate Christmas with them every year. My grandmother came up with the idea after a friend gave her a Christmas bulb that had been hand-blown from the volcanic ash of Mount St. Helens in Washington State. I must confess, it always seemed singularly strange to think of my grandma as a Christmas bulb. In fact, no one in the family liked the idea of taking her out of the box, much less handling her. That's why we always extended the honor of placing Grandma on the trees to the soldiers who visited us on Christmas Day. Some of them weren't very comfortable with the idea, but in the end they would all agree to do it. When Rob came to our house for Christmas for the first time, he was given this rare honor. At the time, Rob was a petty officer in the Navy, so he was conditioned to be steely under pressure. The military had prepared Rob for almost everything, except for handling Grandma the Christmas ornament. He agreed to do the job, but I could tell it made him nervous. So Grandma went to pick my grandma's bulb out of the box, and very, very carefully he lifted it in the air. Then he slowly turned toward the tree, as if he were handling a live bomb. I could almost see the sweat beading on his forehead as he took his first tentative steps toward our tree. That's when the worst happened. Somehow, some way, the hook on the ornament used to hang the bulb on the tree popped loose. Gravity took over, and the bulb plunged to the floor. Everything seemed to move in slow motion as Rob fumbled for the bulb, trying to catch my fragile grandma. His eyes went wide, his mouth opened in fright, and his hands grasped at thin air. But the inevitable happened. Grandma the ornament crashed against the wooden floor and splintered into 100 pieces. The entire family went quiet. Rob stared at the floor in horror. Then he looked over at us, saw our expressions of silent shock, and gazed back down at my shattered grandma. My grandmother was gone, broken to pieces. All the blood drained from Rob's face as he bent down and began to sweep up the pieces with the edge of his hand. I'm so sorry, he stammered. I had to feel bad for the guy. Here he was at a Christmas party full of people he had never met, and he had just broken their beloved matriarch, still on his knees, sputtering apologies. He desperately wondered if Grandma could be pieced together again like some sort of a Humpty Dumpty. He was so panic-stricken, I didn't even think he'd heard the doorbell. I bent down to help Rob collect the pieces of my grandma and said I would take care of it if he wouldn't mind answering the door. My mom came into the room with a broom and dustpan while Rob got up and went to the door, his face beet red with embarrassment. Rob opened the door and saw a short, sweet-looking old lady standing on the stoop, and she had a gauze bandage wrapped around her head. That was a little odd. "You must be Robert," the old lady said, piercing him with her eyes. She shot out her hand to shake. "I'm Grandma Burmeister." Rob took her hand, very confused. "Your Grandma Burmeister? You heard me, and I'm a little ticked that you dropped me right on my head. Don't they teach you to be more careful in the military?" "What? I mean, what if I had asked to be cremated and turned into a grenade or something?" That's when we all broke out laughing, and Rob realized he'd been the victim of our annual practical joke. My dad explained to him that he bought a new hand-blown glass ornament every year, and the hook on the end was fixed to release when it was lifted out of the box. My grandma was alive and well and having the time of her life. Every year, she stood at the end of the driveway waiting for the signal that she'd been dropped. I realize this practical joke might seem a little bit mean, but those soldiers are tough and they all survive. Besides, it was my grandma's idea, and she lived just to pull this Christmas prank every year. This was Rob's first introduction to me and my bizarre family, and to his credit, he didn't run for the hills. We became the best of friends, and in the strange way that practical joke makes me appreciate family and friends and grandmothers all the more. This Christmas tradition reminds me that our relationships are fragile and must be treated with large doses of love and compassion. Unfortunately, it isn't always that way, because tensions among family and friends can run high, especially around Christmas time, when the hectic pace of the season drives people to say and do things they regret. That's why counselors do a bustling business around the holidays. The retailers aren't the only ones that thrive. I'm not saying that when we're with family we should walk on eggshells, afraid of what we might say or do. I'm simply saying that we need to treat our family with the same tenderness as someone carrying a hand-blown heirloom ornament. Christmas is about love of family and love of friends. So, as you approach any big family event with trepidation, remember the immortal words of 1 Corinthians 13, 4 through 7. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices in the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. These words are God's guidebook to loving relationships, and probably should be posted prominently at all family events. Study the words carefully. And this Christmas, give your grandmother a big hug, but not so hard that you break her. And thank you very much for your time. Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.